What it do, everybody? It's your boy King Crowder back again, dropping another gem. This one's gonna turn a little bit more to the dark side, but I believe this story is phenomenal to the U.S. history and how we are where we are today. And members, we knew that outsmarted our government. Today's focus is on Frank Matthew, aka Mr. Untouchable. Frank Matthew was born February 13th, 1944, and has disappeared and not been seen since June 26, 1973. Also known as the Black Caesar, Mark IV, Pee Wee, he is an American drug trafficker who sold heroin and cocaine owning the East Coast of the United States, where he operated in 21 states and supplied dealers from multiple regions, according to the DEA. At this height, Mr. Untouchable was a top 10 drug dealer in the United States, known to have saved more than $25 million. Mr. Untouchable was known to live a flamboyant lifestyle, luxury homes, vehicles, and was known to have regular sporting trips to Las Vegas to launder his money and gamble. He hosted a Black American drug event in Atlanta in 1971 and another one in Las Vegas in 1972 before his disappearance. Mr. Matthew was born, like I said, February 13th in Durham, North Carolina. His mother died when he was 4 years old, and he was raised by his auntie, Mrs. Steele, the wife of a police lieutenant. His auntie and uncle named him Pee Wee, where he attended East End Elementary School, but dropped out of school when he was in the 7th grade at the age of 14. He began to be in teenage gangs around the area of Durham, stealing chickens from local farms. When confronted by the farmer, Mr. Matthews showed he wasn't scared and assaulted that man with a brick. He was arrested in October 1960 and served a year in prison in a Raleigh State Correctional Facility. After he was released, Mr. Matthews decided to go north to Philadelphia, where he worked as a numbers writer. He was incredibly intelligent. In Philadelphia, he would make his connections as a future drug connection with a known named Major Carson, a member of the Black Mafia. Matthews was arrested again in 1963, and in order to avoid conviction, he was forced to leave Philly. He decided to leave Philly and head north towards Bed-Stuy in New York City, where he became a barber and they collected numbers, the same thing he did while he was in Philadelphia. He was a well-known collector and enforcer. In 1965, Mr. Matthew got tired of the numbers game, man, and he wanted to transition to more faster money, and he wanted to try heroin. People do not know that in the early 1960s that the American Mafia, controlled the heroin imports and exports to different connections. Mr. Matthew decided to partner with Gambino family and the Bonanno Crowns families of the 5-4 borders, where he wanted to get in operations. However, he noticed how hard it was due to them discriminating against him since he was a Black American. Around this time, he met a Spanish connect, and he was a prolific numbers operator named Marquez, who put in the word for him and his Cuban plug named Orlando Gonzalez Ruiz, who was a major cocaine supplier. Before he would left the United States, he had to flee to Venezuela. Venezuela, if you did not know, had a non-extradition clause. He fled to Venezuela, where he did not get arrested by United States police. Him and Mr. Matthews formed a tight connection and decided to run a drug network. He was sending Mr. Matthews tons and pounds of cocaine through his internet work through Miami, New Jersey, and New York City. People do not know that his plug later on faced a conviction and arrest, and we all know Mr. Matthews began to get notoriety. The IRS wondered how this North Carolina guy began to service and have this much money. Mr. Matthews controlled, packaged, and the sale of heroin through majority of the East Coast. He had Brooklyn on lock, Bronx on lock, in the entire boroughs. He was getting his cocaine and stuff so cheap that it became an issue as far as the taxes. The Badino family got jealous of Mr. Matthews and began to drop tips on him. Him being a black man in this country, controlling that much of this money became an issue. The hate and jealousy became alarm. They tried to arrest Mr. Untouchable with tax evasion and drugs on consignment. In that time, Mr. Matthew had a federal court prosecutor in Brooklyn try to charge him with 40 pounds of cocaine because somebody was arrested. He was extradited and most likely indicted at the Las Vegas airport. When he was out on bail, he reduced his sentence and paid. What most people did not realize is that Mr. Matthews had his out, which is another word for saying the way to get out the game, already bounded and paid for. He liquidated his assets, paid his money, and disappeared to this day. No pictures have been seen, no images have been known, and nobody knows about this gentleman, about Mr. Matthews on this current moment. He is one of the stories that we hear about in America's crime stories, the one that actually had a plan, left it, succeeded, and practiced it. He has been out of the American limelight and no one has seen this gentleman since 1973. Mr. Touchable is a name that Mr. Matthews from the great state of Durham, North Carolina, actually did what he said he was going to do. I must give him credit. It isn't a crazy American story, and a movie needs to be made about this gentleman. A rags to riches story. His mother died. He built himself up, made himself a self-made millionaire, and finally outsmarted and outlasted the U.S. government. It's your boy King Crowder, checking back out again with another story of these stories of the United States that are not told and should be mentioned. This one today was on the great Mr. Frank Matthew, aka Mr. Untouchable. Hopefully you learned something about this gentleman and what he did, even though it was bad. The story is truly remarkable. Let me know what you learned. Hopefully you learned something today. Anything else new, make sure you get back at me. Sub to the channel. Hopefully you learned something. Peace.